The control room was full of quiet whispers. People stared at the alien girl standing near the command console. Her name was Liari, daughter of a noble house from the planet Eurelian. She was known for her calm voice and sharp eyes, but now something strange was happening. Liari looked at the human engineer beside her. He was tall, with dark hair and tired eyes. His name was Jake Carter, a simple human technician, not a warrior, not a leader. But today, everything changed because of one sentence. She stepped forward and said clearly, "I accept the human male, Jake Carter, as my chosen mate." The room froze. You could hear the hum of the engines, the soft buzz of distant alarms, but no one spoke. Jake blinked, thinking he misheard. "What?" he asked, his voice full of confusion. Liari turned to him, her expression serious. "It is a matter of honor," she said. "You saved me in front of my people, in our law. That means I must bond with you, or I bring shame to my family." The other crew members, humans and aliens alike, started whispering. Some looked shocked, others amused. One of the guards even laughed under his breath. A human with a royal Eurelian girl. "Unbelievable," he muttered. Jake felt his face heat up. It pulled her from a collapsed corridor during the station's power failure. She had been trapped, losing air. A T had carried her to safety, he thought. It was just duty. But to her, it meant something more. Liari. "I only did what anyone would have done," Jake said slowly. "But not everyone did," she replied. "Only you came for me." Her eyes held something strange like pride, maybe even gratitude. But there was also pressure. The weight of old alien traditions. The captain of the ship, a human named Commander Voss, cleared his throat. "This isn't something we take lightly," he said, trying to stay neutral. "But according to Alliance law, if both parties agree, then the bond is legal." Jake looked at Liari again. She was calm, but he could see something hidden: fear, shame, hope. He sighed. "If this helps you, if this protects your name, then I agree." A sharp gasp moved through the crowd. It was done. The agreement was accepted, and Jake Carter, human engineer, was now officially the mate of a Eurelian noble. Later that night, Jake sat in his quarters. He stared at the ceiling, his mind full of questions. Why did she do it? Was it really just tradition? The door beeped and Liari entered without knocking. She was dressed in soft silver robes, her long purple hair braided tightly. Jake sat up, surprised. "You don't have to keep coming here," he said gently. "I'm not forcing anything." "No," Liari replied, sitting across from him. "But the others think you should have already claimed me." Jake coughed, nearly choking on his drink. She was direct, honest, in a way that made his ears burn. "I'm not like that," he said quickly. "I don't use people. I don't own anyone." Liari tilted her head. "Then what do humans do after bonding?" Jake smiled slightly. "We wait. We talk. We make sure it's real." She nodded slowly, as if learning something new. "They say humans are emotional, passionate, even wild," she said. "But you are quiet. I don't want you to feel forced," Jake replied. "Not because of tradition or laws, but because you want to." Liari looked at him for a long moment. Then she stood up and bowed her head slightly. "Good night, human Jake," she whispered. Before leaving the room, Jake sat in silence again. He didn't know if he had made things better or worse. All he knew was that the agreement had changed everything. And now, the eyes of the crew in the galaxy were watching. Outside the ship, stars burned silently, but inside, something much more dangerous had just begun. Not a war of weapons, but a war of hearts, rules, and unspoken desire. Jake had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but one thing was clear. This bond wasn't going to stay quiet for long. Liari walked slowly through the metal hallway of Deck 3. Her boots made soft clicks with every step. Crew members passed her, nodding politely. But she could feel it, their eyes on her back, their whispers just loud enough to hear. She still sleeps alone in his quarters. I thought humans were more aggressive. Maybe he's not into aliens. Poor thing, she's royal and still untouched. The words hit her ears like tiny blades. Eurelian hearing was sharper than human. She heard every word, every laugh, and it burned inside her chest. She kept walking, her face calm. But her hands were clenched tightly by her sides. Lyari had faced training fields, court politics, and space storms. But this, silent judgment, was worse. It was personal, inside his work bay. Jake was fixing a broken power core. Sparks flew and grease covered his hands. He hummed softly, focused and calm. He didn't know what was happening outside, didn't know that the entire ship was now watching them like a show. The door opened, Lyari stepped in. Her arms crossed, her face unreadable. Jake smiled, wiping his hands with a cloth. "Hey, you all right?" She didn't answer at first. Instead, she walked over to the table and picked up a small tool. "I heard them," she said, voice low. Jake blinked. "Heard who?" "The crew," she replied. "They think I am weak, unwanted, untouched." Her tone was sharp but shaky underneath. Jake's smile faded. He stood up straight, trying to find the right words. "You're not weak, Lyari, and you're definitely not unwanted." "Then why?" she asked, stepping closer. "Why have you not taken me yet? Why do you sleep with your back turned to me? Why do you act like I am made of glass?" Her voice cracked at the last word, and her eyes shimmered. Jake looked down, then back at her. "I'm not here to use tradition as an excuse," he said. "I don't want to take anything you don't give freely with your whole heart." Lyari stared at him, stunned. "No one has ever said that to me," she whispered. Jake chuckled softly. "Maybe that's the problem with nobles. Too many rules, not enough choice." That night, Lyari stood in front of the mirror in her shared quarters. She touched her reflection, her fingers tracing the markings on her skin. Eurelian females were taught to attract their mates with beauty and strength, but nothing she did seemed to move Jake. She remembered her mother's words. "Men may love with their eyes, daughter, but they bond with respect." Lyari never understood those words before. Now she did. Jake wasn't cold. He was careful, but she didn't want careful. She wanted him to want her, not for honor or duty, but for her. The next morning, the gossip grew louder. Someone had even drawn a joke on the mess hall screen. A cartoon of Jake sitting in bed while Lyari looked sad beside him. The caption read, "Still waiting, Your Highness?" Lyari's cheeks turned hot, her hands trembling. She stood up and slammed her tray onto the table. The room went silent. "I may be a noble," she said loudly, "but I am not some trophy to claim." She turned to the crowd, her voice strong. "And anyone who mocks my mate, mocks me." The crew didn't laugh anymore. They looked down, some ashamed, some surprised. Jake, standing near the door, heard it all. He didn't speak, but he felt something shift inside him, respect, pride. Maybe something deeper. Later, Lyari found him on the observation deck. The stars sparkled across the glass like frozen fire. She walked beside him and said softly, "I'm sorry for the pressure." The whispers. The scene. Jake shook his head. "You don't need to apologize." He paused, then added, "But I do owe you one thing." He turned toward her, looking into her eyes. "I may be quiet, Lyari, but that doesn't mean I don't care." She smiled for the first time in days. It was small, soft, but real. The space between them shrank just a little. "You're different," she said. Jake raised an eyebrow. "Good, different, or bad different?" "Frustratingly noble," she replied. He laughed, and for the first time, she laughed too, As the night fell on the ship and the stars kept moving outside, the whispers began to fade, because now, Liari wasn't just waiting, she was planning, and when she made her move next time, it wouldn't be because of gossip. It would be because of something real, something neither she nor Jake could stop. Not tradition, not fear, not even honor. Just once, the ship floated above the planet Yorvalis. It was a calm world, filled with green skies and glowing rivers. Once a year, the Galactic Alliance hosted a Unity Festival, a celebration of peace, trade, and culture. For most, it was a time to laugh, dance, and eat strange food. But for Liari, tonight was a test of heart, pride, and desire. She stood in front of the mirror, inside her quarters. Wearing the festival dress of her people, silver silk wrapped her body, light as mist, her arms were bare. Her long purple hair braided with tiny crystals, her golden eyes glowed. Softly in the mirror, she wasn't dressing for tradition tonight. She wasn't dressing for politics, she was dressing for him. I won't ask again. She whispered to herself, this time, he'll see me. Meanwhile, Jake stood on the open viewing deck. The festival lights blinked in the distance. Floating drones played soft music in the air. He wore a clean Alliance uniform. No grease, no tools. But he still felt out of place. He watched alien dancers spin through the air. People laughed, cheered, ate glowing snacks from long tables. Still, his eyes kept drifting to the entry doors. He didn't know what or who he was waiting for. Then she walked in, and the room changed. Liari entered the deck with slow, graceful steps. The music didn't stop, but the energy shifted. Crew members turned their heads. Even the captain paused his drink. Jake's breath caught. She wasn't a warrior now. She wasn't a noble either. She was just. Beautiful Liari walked straight to Jake, her steps confident but soft. You look nervous, human, she teased, a smile on her lips. Jake scratched the back of his neck. I feel like I just got invited to a royal wedding, she chuckled. You did? But you're sitting at the table of honor. He smiled at that, then offered his hand. Would you like to dance? She raised an eyebrow. Do humans dance? Not well, he admitted, but I try. She took his hand without hesitation, and for the first time, their fingers touched gently, warmly. Naturally, they moved slowly with the rhythm. The music was soft, made from alien flutes and wind drums. Jake held her hand and waist lightly. Lai followed his steps, her body close but respectful around them. The crew watched quietly, but Lai didn't care anymore. This wasn't for them. This is nice, Jake said softly. Liari looked into his eyes. You always say small words that feel big, he laughed. It's because I mean them. She leaned in closer, close enough to feel his breath. I want to ask you something, she whispered. All right, he replied, heart now racing. If I was not noble, if I was just Liari, the girl in your arms, would you want me? Jake froze for half a second. Then he gave a small, honest nod. Yes. Very much. Hours passed. The festival lights dimmed. The music faded. People left in pairs, laughing. And full, Jake and Liari walked together through the quiet hallway, side by side. Their shoulders brushing now and then. She stopped near his quarters, turning to face him. Thank you, she said, for dancing, for listening, for not running. Jake smiled. Why would I run from you? She looked at him deeply. Because I'm not easy to understand. Or to handle, he paused, then replied, You're not a storm, Liari. You're the calm after one. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she reached forward, fingers touching the center of his chest. My people wear war paint before battles. She said softly, but tonight, I wore this dress only for you. Jake looked down at her hand, then back into her eyes. The air was thick between them, certain, charged, sweet, But he didn't move closer. Not yet. Instead, he said, "You're not mine yet, Liari. But if you stay, one day you might be." She blinked slowly, surprised, then gave a small nod. "I will stay," she whispered. "But next time, I won't just dance." She turned and walked away, leaving him standing at the door, heart pounding. Thoughts racing. This wasn't just an agreement anymore. This was something more real, more dangerous, as the lights dimmed and the stars outside blinked silently. Jake realized something he hadn't before. He didn't just respect Liar, he wanted her, not because she was royal, not because of duty, but because of who she was. And next time, he knew things might never be the same again. The ship floated in silence above a quiet moon. Stars shimmered outside the window. But inside Jake's mind, a storm had begun. He sat alone in the tech lab. The screen in front of him glowed blue. It showed an old Eurelian file, locked and protected. He wasn't supposed to access it, but Commander Voss had given him permission only because it concerned his mate. Jake's hands shook slightly as he tapped the screen. Lines of alien text scrolled past. Then he saw it. Liari, of House Sereth, engagement contract. Warlord Varnix, blood rank 6. His eyes widened. She had been promised to someone else. Not just anyone, but a powerful warlord, a killer, a brute. A man feared across 3 systems. Jake leaned back, heart pounding. Why didn't she tell him? Meanwhile, Liari sat in the ship's meditation room, her legs crossed, eyes closed, trying to find peace, but she couldn't. Not tonight. She had felt Jake's distance since the festival. He had been warm, then suddenly cold again, and now he was quiet, like something inside him had changed. She knew this day would come, the day her past reached him before she could. She wanted to tell him herself, but now it was too late. Jake found her there, sitting under the soft glow of the ceiling light. Her back was straight, but her shoulders tense. He stood silently for a moment, then spoke. "You didn't tell me," he said softly. Liari opened her eyes. "I didn't know how," she whispered. Jake walked in and sat across from her. He held no anger in his voice, only hurt. "You were going to marry a warlord?" She nodded slowly. "My family arranged it when I was still young." "He's dangerous, isn't he?" Jake asked. Liari looked down. "Yes, he sees mates as property, not people." Jake clenched his fist. "You ran away from him?" "I escaped," she said, her voice firm now. "But the bond law of my people said I needed a public claim to protect myself, or I'd be dragged back. So that's why you chose me," Jake said, his voice heavy. Liari's eyes met his, shimmering with regret at first. "Yes, but not now." She stood slowly and walked closer. "When you saved me, I saw something in you," she said. "Not fear, not power. It's just kindness." Jake looked up at her. "I was just doing my job." "No," she replied. "You looked at me like I was more than a noble, more than a contract." Jake stayed silent, then said, "I just wish you had told me the truth." Liari sighed. "I was afraid you'd walk away." "I might have," Jake said, "but I didn't." Silence filled the room. Then Jake stood up, facing her. "You're strong, Liari. You've escaped a life most people couldn't survive." He stepped closer. "But I need to know something right here, right now." She held her breath. "Are you with me because you want to be? Or because I was your escape plan?" Liari didn't blink. "I chose you." "As my shield?" "Yes," she said. "But now, I choose you as a man." She reached out and touched his hand. "No law is forcing me anymore." Jake looked down at her fingers, warm against his skin, then back into her eyes, and saw no lies. Later that night, Jake sat alone on the observation deck, his mind calmer, his heart full of questions, but no fear. He understood now. Liari was not a helpless girl looking for safety. She was a fighter, learning how to trust again. She had lived under chains of politics, but she wanted more. She wanted freedom, and somehow, with him, she felt safe enough to try. Jake smiled softly. He had once thought she was too bold, too fast, too complicated. But now he realized she was also scared, just like him that night. Liari returned to their quarters quietly. She didn't wear silk or jewelry, just a simple robe and her natural beauty. She sat beside him on the bed, not touching, just close. No more lies, she said. No more distance, he replied. They didn't kiss, didn't touch, but the silence between them was no longer awkward. It was warm, full of new understanding. Outside the ship, a star pulsed gently in the black sky. Inside, two hearts finally beat in rhythm, not from tradition, not from duty, but from truth. And as sleep slowly came to both, one thing was certain. The past was finally behind them, but the future, it was starting to glow. The silence was broken by the sound of boots. Heavy, proud, and full of power, guards rushed to the docking bay. The ship had received a surprise visitor, and no one was smiling. Warlord Varnix had arrived. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and covered in armor made of dark metal. His face was sharp, his eyes cold like ice. He stepped out of his warship like a king entering a battlefield. Two of his personal guards followed behind him, both silent, both deadly. The crew of the Alliance vessel Horizon watched nervously. No one had expected this, especially not Jake Carter. Jake stood in the corridor when the alarm came through. A message flashed on his comm. High rank, Eurelian visitor. Warlord Varnix. Status, cleared by Alliance diplomatic code. His heart dropped. He knew that name. It was the one from Liari's contract. The man who once claimed her as a future wife. He didn't wait. He ran to find her. Liari stood by the garden dome, watching floating lights dance around glowing plants. She had finally felt peace these last few days. She had laughed with Jake, eaten beside him, even rested her head on his shoulder. But that peace shattered when Jake ran in, his face pale. He's here, Jake said, out of breath. Liari turned slowly, her entire body going still. Varnix? She asked. Jake nodded once. She closed her eyes and whispered. It was only a matter of time. The two of them stood near the main entrance as Varnix entered the hall. Crew members stood along the sides, unsure if they were watching a political meeting or the start of a fight. Varnix's sharp eyes found Liari first. He smiled coldly. My runaway bride, he said, its voice echoing through the hall, and the human boy who thinks he can replace me. Jake stepped forward, but Liari raised her hand, stopping him. She stepped ahead instead. Strong and proud. I am not your bride, Varnix. I never was, he laughed. Your blood says otherwise, Liari. I claimed you long ago. And you vanished like a thief. Jake couldn't stay silent. She's not yours to claim. She's free to choose. Varnix's head turned slowly to face him. His smile faded. You are the choice, he said with disgust. A human, with oil on his hands and fear in his heart. Jake stood firm. I may not wear armor, but I stand beside her. That's more than you ever did. Tension filled the air like static. Liari stepped between the two men. I called Jake my mate under our law. My claim is official. Your contract is broken. Varnix's eyes narrowed. Not until I challenge him. Gasps filled the hall. Even the captain looked unsure. Challenge? Jake asked, confused. Liari turned to him, her face pale. It means a fight. A public duel. Winner keeps the claim. Jake's stomach turned. He wasn't a warrior. He was a mechanic. But he looked at Liari, saw the fear in her eyes, and stepped forward. I accept. The fight was set in the training arena. Lights shined down on a round space surrounded by armored walls. Weapons were allowed except for killing strikes, but in Varnix's eyes, this wasn't just about honor. It was about winning her back by force. Jake wore only light armor. He held a stun staff, his hands sweating. Across from him, Varnix looked like a monster, strong, skilled, and full of hate. The alarm rang, and the fight began. Varnix struck first, fast and hard. Jake barely dodged. Falling to the side, the crowd gasped as sparks flew from the floor. Liari watched from above, her hands clenched in fists. Her heart screamed. But she stayed silent. This was Jake's fight now. Jake rolled to his feet, breathing hard. He couldn't win by strength, but maybe by smarts. He noticed Varnix's foot wide, slow to turn. Jake began to move in circles. Using speed, each time Varnix struck, Jake dodged and jabbed, small hits. Nothing serious, but they added up. The warlord grew angry. "You fight like a coward." He yelled. "No," Jake replied. "I fight to protect her." "That's something you'll never understand." With one last dodge and a sudden swing, Jake's staff hit Varnix behind the knee. The big alien stumbled on. Jake pressed his weapon to the warlord's chest. A loud buzz rang out. Match won. The crowd stood in silence. Even the guards looked shocked. Varnix lay on the ground, breathing heavily. Jake dropped the staff and turned to Liari. She ran to him without a word. Not because of the fight, but because she had never been more sure of anything in her life. Varnix stood slowly, pride shattered. He looked at Liari one last time. "I hope he gives you what I could not," he said coldly. And then he left. Later that night, Liari and Jake sat quietly in their quarters. Neither spoke for a while. Then Liari broke the silence. "You didn't have to fight," she whispered. Jake turned to her. "Yes, I did." He smiled. "Tired, but happy, because I'm not just your shield anymore. I'm your choice." She touched his cheek. "For the first time in my life," she said, "I feel truly chosen too." The ship floated quietly above the glowing rings of a gas giant. Inside the quarters of Jake Carter, silence pressed heavy. Like gravity, he stood near the window, arms crossed, eyes lost in the stars. His thoughts full of the duel, of Varnix's cruel words. Of the moment Liari ran into his arms without care for tradition, law, or blood. And yet, something still sat between them. Not space, not silence, but a question neither of them had asked out loud. The door opened softly. Jake turned, expecting another message from the bridge. But it wasn't a message. It was Liari. And this time, she didn't knock. She entered wearing a long cloak of deep violet. Her hair was down, flowing over her shoulders like rivers of starlight. Her golden eyes met his, steady and serious. "Close the door," she said quietly. Jake did as she asked, confused but calm. She didn't speak at first. She walked to the center of the room, where soft lights glowed from the ceiling. Then, with both hands, she pulled the cloak from her shoulders, letting it fall to the floor like a whisper. Jake's breath caught in his throat. She stood there in a simple underdress, thin, soft, almost transparent. Her form was delicate, but her posture was strong, like a soldier who had dropped her shield, not for surrender, but for truth. "Human," she said, her voice steady but warm. "It's been over a month." Jake swallowed hard. "I know, you haven't touched me," she added, taking a step closer. "I know," he said again, voice low. She took another step, not once, not even a kiss. Jake looked down, trying to breathe. "I was waiting," he whispered. "For what?" she asked, now just one step away from him. Jake looked up, eyes locking with hers. "For you to want it." She reached out and placed a hand on his chest. His heart pounded beneath her fingers. "I do want it," she said, "but not because I'm a noble, not because of duty. I want you because you see me, not the title, not the dress. Just me. Jake didn't move, didn't speak, not because he didn't feel, but because he felt too much. He reached out slowly, gently brushing a lock of hair from her face. "You're not glass," he said. "You're fire. And I was afraid I'd burn. You're worse. Burn myself." Her lips curved into the softest smile. "You won't burn," she said. "Not if we walk into the fire together." Jake took her hands in his. His thumbs brushed across her fingers like they were made of light. He stepped closer, chest to chest, forehead resting lightly against hers. No passion forced, no hunger rushed. Just a quiet storm, building slowly. Then, finally, he whispered, "May I kiss you now?" She answered not with words, but with her lips. The kiss was not wild, not rough. It was slow, full of all the things they had never said. All the nights spent lying inches apart, but feeling miles away. All the stolen glances, the silent wishes, all poured into one long, quiet touch when they pulled away. Liari's cheeks were flushed, but not from embarrassment, from finally being chosen. Not claimed, she placed his hand against her waist, guiding him, showing him without force. Without words, Jake understood. He didn't rush, he didn't grab, he simply held her. As if she were the most precious thing in the galaxy. They lay side by side later, the light soft and warm, her head rested on his arm. His fingers drawing small circles on her back. No one spoke, because no words were needed. She had undressed, not just her body, but her fear, her past, her doubts, and Jake had responded not with fire, but with care. "I was afraid you didn't want me," she said quietly. "I wanted you every day." Jake replied, "But I didn't want to hurt you by rushing." She smiled, closing her eyes. "You didn't rush, Jake. You arrived exactly when I needed you." The next morning, the crew noticed something different. Jake walked with quiet confidence. Liari walked beside him, not behind, not ahead, but side by side. Some whispered again, but this time, Liari didn't hear insults. She heard respect. They weren't just bonded by law anymore. They were bonded by choice, outside. The stars still moved across the void, but inside their hearts, something brighter had started to shine, not born from tradition, not built by force, but lit by trust. And that light was something no power in the galaxy could steal. The sirens wailed across the ship. Red lights flashed in every corridor. Pilots ran to their battle stations. Engineers prepared the shields, and the crew of Alliance vessel Horizon braced for war. A massive fleet was coming. Not pirates, not raiders, but a Eurelian breakaway force, led by old houses who still believed in arranged bonds, bloodlines, and control. At the center of the chaos, Jake Carter stood tall in the command room. Not as a technician anymore, but as someone worth following. Beside him stood Liari, her long hair tied back, her battle armor silver and marked with her family's symbol cross stars over a flame. But she didn't wear it for her house. She wore it for him. 3 enemy ships on approach. The scanner officer shouted. Eurelian classively armed, Jake tapped the console, checking shield strength, hold formation. "Don't fire unless they do." Liari stepped forward, voice strong. "Open a channel. Let me speak." A moment later, the enemy appeared on the screen. Their leader, an elder noble, looked shocked. "Liar? What are you doing standing beside that human?" he demanded. "I stand where I choose," she said firmly. "My bond is no longer of blood, but of honor." The elder scoffed. "You threw away our traditions for a species of dirt diggers." And emotion. Jake raised an eyebrow. "Hello to you too." Liari didn't flinch. "I didn't throw anything away," she said. "I broke a chain and found something stronger." The elder's face darkened. "Then you will fall with him." The channel closed. The battle was about to begin. Inside the ship, the crew moved quickly, but many looked at Jake and Liari no longer with confusion, but with trust. Jake turned to Liari. You don't have to stay here. You can get to the escape pod if I'm not running, she said, cutting him off. This is my fight too. He looked at her for a long second, then nodded. Together then, the first wave hit. Enemy cannons lit up the darkness. Explosions rocked the ship, but Horizon held strong. Jake gave calm orders, his voice clear. Liari moved between stations, helping officers with shield patterns only Aurelians would know. Their bond was no longer personal, it was now saving lives. The crew worked like one body because their leaders stood united, human and alien. Logic and instinct, brain and heart. An hour later, the tide began to turn. 2 enemy ships were damaged. One tried to retreat. The crew cheered, but Liari stayed sharp. She noticed a small signature on the radar. A stealth pod moving toward the hull's lower side, boarding party. She shouted. Jake didn't hesitate. He grabbed a rifle and ran with her. This time, they fought not with rules or tradition, but side by side, back to back, inside the cargo bay. The enemy broke through. Aurelian elites wearing old-world armor stormed in. But Liari was faster. She struck with her stun staff. Graceful and deadly, Jake covered her, shooting with precision. Every move said one thing: we belong here. Together. One soldier tried to strike Jake from behind. Liari screamed and jumped forward. She took the blow on her shoulder, but stayed standing. Jake pulled her back and held her eyes wild with fear. You okay? She grinned through the pain. I've had worse from training dummies. Finally, the enemy surrendered. They weren't ready for a team like this. They thought love was weakness. They were wrong. Jake and Liari returned to the command deck. As heroes, cheers echoed across the halls. Even Commander Voss clapped. Never thought I'd say this, he said, but a mechanic and a noble girl just saved the entire ship. Jake shrugged. We're full of surprises. Liari smiled. Especially when you don't underestimate the heart. That night, the ship was quiet. Stars drifted past the windows like glowing dreams. Jake and Liari sat in their quarters. The war behind them, her wound was treated. Wrapped in soft bandage, she leaned against him, her head on his chest. He held her close, like she was the one thing he didn't want to lose in the whole galaxy. I used to think love was something forced, she said, a duty, not a desire. Jake kissed her forehead, and I thought love was something loud and fiery, he replied. But you taught me it can be quiet too. Like gravity, she smiled. I chose you to protect me, she whispered, but now I choose you simply to walk with me. Outside, a new star blinked to life. Inside, 2 souls rested not as alien and human, not as noble and mechanic, but as equals, bound not by blood or law, but by choice, trust, and love, and in a galaxy full of war, tradition, and silence, they had created something new, a bond that could never be broken.